Hello, it's Amy. I'm back with the Journal of Emily Shore. Today we are beginning with the entry for January the 15th, 1839. At last we have had the satisfaction of eating at breakfast butter made with our own fair hands, not by any servants, for we see that Manuel knows nothing about the matter. According to the instructions of the Burnets and Houghtons, we have begun to take in 2 bottles of milk every day. We took in 2 bottles on Sunday and scalded the milk. At the same time, the H's man, Antonio, took in 2 bottles for us also, and scalded them to compare with ours. On Monday morning we skimmed ours and found the cream equal to Antonio's, which he sent down to us. We then scalded the milk left by Antonio the second time, and scalded also 2 fresh bottles. The milk of our yesterday's scalding we were obliged to keep for breakfast. This morning we skimmed both and mixed the 4 different creams together, making for breakfast the milk which had been skimmed twice, and scalding again what had been skimmed once. I then began making the butter by stirring the cream in a basin with a wooden spoon. Mamma relieved me at times, but I began and ended it, and finally washed and made it up, so that when I turned out about 3/4 of a pound of beautiful butter, I felt quite proud of myself. The whole business occupied about 20 or 25 minutes, but we shall be quicker another time, as we fully mean to continue the plan. The scalding is a Devonshire art, and I should think no one in Funchal does it but ourselves and the Burnets, who are partly of Devonshire origin. So that's very interesting about the butter. Evidently, there was not any butter of the sort that they're used to available. I don't know much about Portuguese cuisine, and certainly not in the 1800s. Perhaps it wasn't common to eat a great deal of butter at all. And so that would explain why the servants were a little bit unknowledgeable about how to make the butter as they're used to in England. And I know that butter is, fairly easy to make if you're willing to put that physical labor in. But it's interesting that they decided they must have their butter and that they would do it themselves rather than growing accustomed to the local cuisine instead. Although I think butter is one of those foods that if I were living anywhere else outside of Canada, I would probably find some way to find the kind of butter that suits my palate and that I'm used to. Because it's just one of those foods that's so integral to the cuisine that I need to have it. January 17th, Thursday. The manners of Portuguese servants, without their intending any disrespect, are such as would be pronounced very free and easy in England. Manuel, when he brings in what he has brought, will stay in the room to discuss its merits, which he will lean over the table to do so. He loses no opportunity of prating, and then he wants to insist on doing a thing. He tries to force the spoon or plate out of our hands, saying most respectfully, "If de please, ma'am, if de please, ma'am," one of his few English phrases. He also laughs whenever he thinks fit, especially if he thinks he has got the better of me in an argument about the troco change, in which he is especially stupid. Everything with him is a bit naff, whether it be really a bit and a half, or 2 bits, or half a bit. He also begins every sentence with "Here's de," his deformed version of "here's the," and this without any meaning whatsoever. January 18th, Friday. I rode in quite a different direction this time, to the east of Funchal, directing the man to take me to the Ribiera de Saint Gonzalez. The road lies quite along the edge of the cliffs, so that I enjoyed to my heart's content the sound and sight of the waves breaking on the black rocks below. I went up and down, rising gradually to the same height, Funchal as usual lying beneath me. The rocks are everywhere overgrown with prickly pear and sprinkled with peach and fig trees, the former going out of blossom, the latter already in leaf. Many of the vines still retain the fresh green foliage of last summer. I remarked a rose bush covered with the brightest crimson blossoms overhanging the edge of the cliff. When I began to ride, the morning mists on the mountains were tinted with the colors of the rainbow, which is often the case here. The beautiful scarlet geranium takes root in the clefts of the rocks and mantles the banks of the Riviera almost down to the bottom of its channels with its luxuriance of blossom. The road crosses the Riviera by a stone bridge of one lofty arch and ascends steeply on the opposite side. I ascended nearly all the rest of my ride, which I continued some considerable way farther, still nearly along the edge of the mountains. As I rode back, the view over Funchal was noble and the expanse of sea immense. It was a delight to be entirely in the country. All around was solitary and silent, and the road was only trodden occasionally by peasants bearing cans of milk. I saw a few quintas above me. In one place I rode close to a parapet about 2 feet high, which was the only protection from an abrupt precipice, perhaps 700 or 800 feet deep, so steep that I could see nothing over the parapet but the sea. In fact, a single start of the horse might have thrown me clear down the whole descent. I should have been a little nervous here if I did not know how quiet the horse was. I found to my horror that I had kept Mr. Freeman's horse above 2 hours, and it was now 1 o'clock. I have felt the compunction for it all day, and shall not be easy till I can apologize in person. January 19, Saturday. Miss Tellis came this morning and gave us another lesson in Portuguese. She told us a great deal about the English residents in Madeira, who she says have most of them risen from the condition of small clerks and shopkeepers. And then, having very quickly made their money, they packed off their children, says Miss T, to be educated in England. These now assume great airs, look down on the Portuguese, and will not associate with them, which she says once made her think they must be the finest people in the world, but when she came to England, she soon found the absurdity of their pretensions. All the residents speak an infamously bad Portuguese, as is natural if they did not condescend to associate with the Portuguese gentry. It seems that no Portuguese lady is ever allowed by the custom of the country to walk anywhere by herself, whether she be married or unmarried, which I should think a very disagreeable restraint. Indeed, till lately, even 2 ladies could not walk together without a father or brother. One ought to become very brazen after a season in Funchal, for nowhere is one so incessantly gazed on and even stared full in the face. Wherever one goes, spectators lounging in balconies and people on horse or foot, passing or meeting one in the street, always indulge themselves with a determined look. This staring habit is a principal amusement of the idle Portuguese, and I suppose the English are the most curiously examined. I am accustomed to it now, but I was obliged to turn away my head to laugh the other evening, when Louisa and I were sitting down in the praca, and a mustached Portuguese fidalgo, who was pacing up and down with an oratorical friend, regularly gave me a good stare every time he passed, which might be about 15 times. Another habit which amuses the visitor in Funchal is that of bowing to every lady whom a gentleman meets. This has happened to us very often, but not universally, owing, I believe, to the English gentlemen neglecting this civility to the Portuguese ladies, which is no wonder, for the Portuguese ladies are not in any respect easily distinguishable from their servants. The lowest orders show a remarkable courtesy to each other. They never meet without taking off their hats or carapaces. They do the same whenever they pass a church or a priest. And that's interesting that she remarks on these social norms and cultural differences. I guess she was of her time and her social class to look on some of these social differences with a bit of disdain. But that is a little disappointing. I'm a little bit disappointed in Emily, because up until I think this point in the journal, she's not been all that dismissive of the different classes and cultures of people that she meets, but she seems to be writing about this as if it's something very strange and something to laugh at. But that is interesting to hear the comments on social class and how she's observing not that much of a difference in dress and mannerism and norms between what she calls, the Portuguese ladies and the, as she says, the lower order. Moving on. January 21st, Monday. We have long had a great curiosity to taste the sugar cane, which is very plentiful now. Every boy in the street is sucking a piece. The cane is somewhat curved, about 1.5 inches in diameter, and extremely heavy. It is divided into joints, each from 2 or 3 inches to 1/2 foot in length. The way to taste it is to cut off a joint and peel off the thick woody rind. There remains a firm white pith, which does not look very inviting, but when you cut into it, slips and bite it, it almost melts into a sweet juice. And I do wonder what that would taste like, fresh sugar cane, because of course, you know, the only time we get sugar cane in this part of the world is after it's been heavily processed into white ground sugar. But we are at the 11-minute mark, so we'll pause it here for today, and I'll be back tomorrow with another reading.